unlike the old code too, you can only cover so much of your lot with a real building. So it's not like it used to be. The old code would allow you everywhere you could cover 75% of your lot with building. In some places you can cover 95% of it. Now you can't. It's the most you can cover a lot with a building, I think, is 65%. Then you can also, you have a caveat for impermeable surface like parking areas and sidewalks and that sort of thing. So we try to look at how Lake was developed over time and prevent what I heard about. Jumped in my head is these big buildings that go straight up, they cover the whole block.
So they don't have to contact the homeowner behind it. The people who will develop it, they don't have any obligation to contact the homeowner.
If they do something straight by the code, they will not have to.
Okay.
If they have to require a variance or conditional land use, they would have that. There will be a letter sent to all adjacent abutting property owners. There will be a public hearing. Just stay in. I brought my business cards. So stay in touch, and if we hear something happening there, they will let me know.
Thank you.
Judith, I'll go to the president last.
Is the city considering at all slowing down the traffic on Federal or addressing the issue of making it a little more homeowner friendly? Because there's a lot of empty homes along Federal Highway. Then you have the whole South Federal that's built too. They just discussed it. Like they've done in West Palm on Olive, they slow down the
Well,
traffic.
Olive actually, and the reason that was able to happen is the city worked to pull and make US 1 all on Dixie Highway. As you may recall, in West Palm, Olive Avenue was, I think, north and Dixie Highway was south. And then negotiated something about 12 years ago to make US 1 just Dixie Highway, so then Olive Avenue became a city street. Whereas I believe Federal Highway in Lake Worth is still a state street or state road. And thus we were able to coordinate in some fashion, taking over the maintenance and whatever. We are a little bit restricted, but we do, like I said, we do have some inroads with Florida Department of Transportation. We've made some good connections there and rebuilt some bridges, so if anything moves down the road, Federal Highway would be abandoned as an alternate for US 1, and Dixie Highway becomes that main road. Because when it gets to you can really tell the character difference as you leave Lake Worth and go to West Palm. It's completely different.
So it's a state road from the canal to...
Yes, Anthony.
There's this erroneous belief that continues to surface that the city can solve its sober house problem by enforcing its short-term rental laws. I'm aware of all the ADA stuff and everything that goes into that, but for some reason it just continues coming up and up and up. Would you just very, very briefly, because I don't want to get stuck on this topic, just explain to us why the city's short-term rental laws have nothing to do with the sober house epidemic and what we can't do about them?
Let's see where I start that answer. Okay, first of all, the city has no use category for a sober house or a halfway house. It is not allowed in the city. Unfortunately, the state has restrictions that deal with community residences 1, 2, 3, and 4, and rehabilitation centers and assisted living centers. But if there is no on-site service being provided, it is not regulated by the state. So effectively, a sober house in Lake Worth is basically, I'm a property owner, owns multifamily property, and I choose to rent my units to people who have issues, whatever they might be. And unless they don't have a use and occupancy, which includes a business license, or they are renting for terms of less than 60 days, which is very hard to prove, they can operate in the city. Now, I understand, and Commissioner Maxwell, I think, has a lot to do with this, is pressuring the state legislature to put in place some restrictions or governance for a sober house. The legislature, though, is having difficulty coming up with a definition of what a sober house is because, like I said, it's basically a collection of people who have issues that the property owners decided to put in one place. They go somewhere else for their job training, somewhere else for their drug rehab or their alcohol abuse or whatever else. And so how you would define what it is, I think everyone's kind of like squirreled about and doesn't know how to actually deal with that. So what we can do, and we have actually at least made the properties better, and we have got, I think it's 7 properties going into the nuisance abatement process, 2 of which have been sort of called a sober house, but lots of stuff happens so PBSO has been watching at least 7 properties, I think it's actually up to 11 on Federal Highway, but we're, I think,
Mark, how many does he have going?
no, for nuisance abatement. Those others are flying back and forth. It's
There
about
were-
7 or 8, isn't it?
9.
9.
9 on the list.
So we become much more vigilant working with PBSO, so some of those those sober houses have people that do things that are against nuisance abatement, drug activity, prostitution, gangs, and so those buildings are triggering 3 sales within a certain period and are being declared nuisance abatement properties. We're also have just tightened up, and the second reading is coming up soon on May 6th, the definition of what can be triggered under the chronic nuisance provision versus nuisance abatement. And that should actually throw more of those properties into that category where at the end of the day they could be closed down. It will be a legal struggle, I will say that, and it may take a while, but we have in there that the ability, and the special magistrate could deem the property a real nuisance and close it down for a period of time.
I wasn't going to get into this, but my neighbor, there was a house next door to her that somebody bought, they rent every 2 weeks to different groups of people. Are you interested in anything doing that? They're driving, that's not it's common, people are going to do that.
Technically, Lake Worth does not allow vacation rentals. If you are in a single-family house, you can only rent your property for 60 days or more.
That we should kind
She should contact Cove compliance. However, there was a group of people that came to the city who all had off-the-books vacation rentals because we did a code compliance thing about 1.5 years ago and said, you really can't do this, and the neighbors were all upset. They stated they were going to file a lawsuit. In the legislature's infinite wisdom, they passed a rule that said if you did not have anything on the books regulating or providing stuff for vacation rental prior to June 2011, you cannot adopt anything. Well, the city already had a definition of what a single-family residence was, limited to no more than 3 unlimited individuals, and you cannot lease it for less than 60 days. So we said, well, that's what our definition is. And the transient housing is 60 days or less. So if it's being rented out for less than 60 days, it's a transient housing which isn't allowed as single-family residential. It has been going on, this is a legal fight for the past year, that because Lake Worth has a history of doing vacation rentals of the sort because we've had snowbirds here for the past 5 decades, and we had apartment buildings that were really advocated as motels, but they were apartments. And so there is a desire to facilitate some mechanism to allow a vacation rental. And as I understand it, the legislature realized they screwed up and are trying to put something in place so that we can actually adopt some new regulations so that we could allow them legally, and if it's so deemed by the city commission. And they wouldn't be operating sort of out there in never land. Well, if they don't act in an appropriate fashion, we can fall back on code compliance and move forward with our code compliance notices. And that may generate lawsuits, and we'll see where a judge sides with us or them. That's all I have on that right now. I'm sorry it's not positive. Any more questioning? Well, that actually can be turned, that can open as a motel, and it is under code compliance, and it's got code cases on it, and they have full permits, and they're moving in a single space, but it's at least we on there.
They are moving.
They are moving, and we hope that they will be open soon.
Just
As
curious,
a motel.
it always looks the same.
Tell me about it. But hope that will be improved at least in the next 6 months. Otherwise, it will be going back to the special magistrate. I brought cards if anybody wants one.
Thank you very much, William.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.